Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Season 3 of the People in Fundraising webcast. I started this almost 2 years ago now, and I've been very honored to welcome guests throughout the social impact sector, including people that I just meet online on LinkedIn, and I'm very intrigued by what they do in the nonprofit development world. And my guest today, Olga Woltman, is someone that I connected with on LinkedIn, and I was very excited to have her on the program. So Olga, thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate being here.
My pleasure. So Olga, just tell us what your role is, what company you're at in the nonprofit world, please.
Yes. So my professional background is entirely in nonprofit sector or nonprofit adjacent sector, I should say, at agencies or within nonprofits themselves. My company is LemonSkies, which I founded about almost going into 5 years, 5 years ago. And I also play a leadership role within the ALS Association.
Dynamite. Thank you. Well, we'll get into LemonSkies a bit more in detail. Before we do that, I would love for you to share with our audience how you entered the development landscape, nonprofit landscape, please.
Yeah, I think in college, a lot of us have very kind of ambitious intentions to make a positive difference in the world. And I happened to move to Washington, D.C. area as soon as I graduated from undergrad. And, my first job out of college was at a nonprofit, and I sort of stuck with that sector. I think it's a little bit hard to exit it once you're there because there's such a sense of purpose. And also, even if you're a young recent grad, you really have an opportunity to participate in many aspects of organization that you may not have at a big Fortune 500 type of company. So
sure.
So that was my journey. As far as fundraising, I feel like I'm one of those probably less usual fundraisers in the sense that I've meandered in and out of fundraising. So I still think that messaging, words, communications, like that's my primary driver. And through that, I do fundraising. So I'm almost like communication first, leading with comms into fundraising space.
Oh, interesting. And was comms marketing, was that in your undergrad studies?
Oh gosh, Tim. So my undergrad it was actually political science and communications, and I went to business school for marketing.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. And you mentioned, Olga, that people enter nonprofits and they typically stay in it for the impact and the opportunities for change that people can have and make a difference in their communities. So has that been the case for you kind of consistently in these nonprofit and nonprofit adjacent roles?
Oh, definitely. And you think about the work we do day in and day out, not every cause is going to be your primary cause, but it has a very definitive purpose. And that attracts people that are very purpose driven. So that creates a very different type of environment. So I would say most definitely, if you're going to spend so much of your time working during the day, it might as well be for something that's positive. Yeah,
absolutely. Well put. Well, let's get into your company, LemonSkies. As you mentioned, Olga, in your intro, you launched it about 5 years ago. So tell us about that, and then I have a follow-up question once you get to that point in the conversation.
Yeah, I've consulted throughout my professional career on and off, and I've been at nonprofits. And at one point, decided that I was ready to work with multiple causes. I didn't want to be kind of focused on a singular thing.
Yeah.
And I have to say, since launching and going into working for myself, it's definitely built my skill set and probably quadruple the pace that you would in a
Wow.
single job, just because you have to shift your mindset. You have to focus on, you may not know everything coming to the table, but you always have to have a solution mindset, right?
Mm.
Like, how am I going to approach it? How am I going to peel back the layers and
Right.
find the most optimal solution for the organization? And you're definitely acquiring a whole another skill set that I don't think I would have had otherwise.
Mm. Excellent. And as you talk about working with multiple clients, Olga, is there a process for you as you're maybe working with one client on a project and then you have to shift to another client? Like, what does that sort of look like mentally or emotionally?
I think it's a little bit, yes, you have to have kind of that quick pivot throughout the course of the day. Okay, now I'm focusing on this. So you have to quickly shift and quickly
Yeah.
refocus and kind of keep all of that straight. So it just takes a certain type of way of thinking. But it is a little bit compartmentalizing, right?
Mm.
Where we may be working on big picture messaging strategy with one client, and with somebody else, it's executing a particular campaign that's ongoing, kind of run of the mill communications that you're executing against the plan.
Yeah.
So it's a very different way of thinking. And, sometimes you almost welcome the respite of, kind of the heavy mental thinking type of work versus sometimes it's great to just sit and write and execute against something and, just sort of, it's never on autopilot, but it's a very
Right.
different type of mental work. So you have to structure yourself for when you perform which types of tasks that you're optimal, and prepare for it. Especially some of the causes I work with, if I'm writing a whole bunch of content, it's going to be a bumpy afternoon. Sometimes you have to have a box of tissues nearby. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting. Um, as you reflect on founding LemonSkies, I'd love for you to share, Olga, any lessons that you have learned along the way as a founder, both ones that have been good, ones that have been challenging, about starting this firm, and maybe even talk a bit about, you mentioned earlier, working with one cause in a prior part of your career, and now you're working with multiple causes all at once. So if you can give us some detail on that, that'd be awesome, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of running a business and starting a business, it's almost like starts from within.
Mm.
I was actually just thinking about it earlier today. If you're the sort of person who takes things very personally,
Mm.
you can have a tough go of it. If
Mm.
rejection is something that you don't feel great about and you ruminate on for days, it's going to be very, very difficult. So, it's definitely embracing the parts of you that thrive on kind of pivoting quickly and changing gears very quickly. And
Yeah.
it's just being a little bit fearless, in terms of, there are things you've probably never had to do as an employee that you do when you run your own business.
Oh,
Like, as an
yeah.
employee, you probably don't have to file, identify insurance and,
Right.
different, you're not exploring the tax code and things like that. Whereas a business owner, you're finding yourself kind of looking into those things that could be a little bit challenging.
Mm.
I think probably the biggest lessons learned is to really kind of be purposeful in direction you're taking,
Mm.
because bigger is not necessarily better, right? So what's the method behind your madness?
Yeah.
And just being very objective about it and not kind of buying into the hype, not buying into, well, I must be growing, I must be bigger. Well,
Mm.
do you? What are you trying to achieve actually? And
Mm.
based on that, making your decisions that are a little bit more pragmatic, I would say that's a really key lesson and key takeaway.
Mm. That's fascinating. For someone who has only worked for one cause at a time
Mhm.
throughout my career, I think that that spirit of entrepreneurship, starting your own firm, I would say it's a in my mind, it's a different level of like self-confidence and self-drive to do what you've done. And also, you mentioned the pitfalls of if someone takes things really personally, or they have a hard time with rejection. Like, you have to know how to do the job, the skill set, and as you mentioned, your skill set is quadrupled in a very short amount of time as a founder, but also knowing yourself, your personality as well. So that's a
Right.
interesting combination there.
Well, it's a little bit of a phenomena, right? When you're, whether it's planning a vacation or starting a business, when you see what everybody else is doing, but you're kind of absorbing collective, things that a multitude of people are achieving, you can't do all the things. So what will you focus on? So you might see, in your Facebook stream, you might see photos from the beach and skiing, but it's being very deliberate. Like, you can't be in both places. So
Yeah,
which route are you?
that's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what can you share, maybe just not the names of clients, but just what do you generally work on with projects? Are they in specific sectors of philanthropy? Are you drawn to certain areas for projects, please?
Yeah, I have probably worked the most in health related, patient advocacy related areas. That's where a lot of my background is. And that spans pretty broadly, right? It's supporting professionals like nursing staff, but it's also specific diseases or specific health type of initiatives. But I've definitely dabbled, I worked with the foreign policy, kind of global issues with one group for a couple of years now, and that allows me to flex a whole another area of my brain that
Yeah.
going back to my undergrad days, right? So I would say it's almost like, does it spark joy? And if the answer is yes, then that's probably a go. And it's just being very realistic when you look at something. If you're in it only because you don't have any other options, that may be something to consider a little bit heavier. So I would say health is something I enjoy. Social good, social services type of areas tend to be my strong suit. I shy away from, I would say, I don't have as much background in conservation and environment as many people do. So that's something that, they're probably individuals that are better suited than me to serve that niche.
I see. Thank you. So in addition to founding LemonSkies, and there's another significant career endeavor that you pursue, and we'll get into that later with your podcast. I also know from your LinkedIn, Olga, that you volunteer with a lot of organizations in your community, such as the Special Olympics in Virginia, as well as a nonprofit called BRAWS.
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 Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't know how to pronounce that, so I did all the letters. So if you could just tell us what attracts you to maybe specifically those organizations, and what their causes focus on, how long you've connected with them, and also how do you determine which nonprofits in your community, whether now or in the past, that you choose to support with your time and your energy, please?
So maybe I'll start with that a little bit from the end. I'm learning how to be a little bit more focused. So the two causes you mentioned are the two I'm involved in. And it's trying, there's so many issues that call for our attention and, are worthy and deserving. But what I've tried to do is apply some self-discipline and not try to be all things to all people. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. Just because if you do too much, you can't do any of it well.
Yeah.
So BRAWS is near and dear to my heart. It's a very local nonprofit in Vienna, Virginia. I've been involved for about 6 years, and what the organization does is provide menstrual supplies, undergarments to women and girls in shelters, schools, various poverty organizations. And the involvement was honestly through just friendships in the community. The founder invited me when it was first originating, probably, is it 6 or 7 years ago now? So that's kind of how the journey started. I didn't know that was my cause, but saying yes to an opportunity, and then eventually joining the board and serving in that capacity has been wonderful, because it connects with my local community, but also women's health issues, issues of equity, dignity, things like that. My journey to
No, that's marvelous. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to share that.
Yeah.
And then Special Olympics Virginia, I don't know if you knew this, I worked at Special Olympics International for a number of years. And so that's always, it really definitely made an impact on my life. And just, it's so many causes have so much heartache and hardship attached to them. And Special Olympics is a very joyous cause. So it's a very positive. It's not to say that populations that are supported by Special Olympics are, there's not difficult things that people go through. But overall, as a cause and its mission, it's about the inclusivity, it's about the joy of sport. And that's something that really resonates with me. And also, sports is something that I enjoy, my family enjoys greatly. So it's kind of, honestly, I couldn't have picked a better organization or a better cause to be involved with. So when an opportunity came up to serve on the local, my state's local board, it's just something I really wholeheartedly embraced, and just really grateful to be a part of it.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, and I liked, Olga, how you started to answer that question by saying, there's so many worthy causes and certainly needs locally and on up to internationally, but and I think that ties into what you said at the beginning, that people working in nonprofits, they want to make a difference in the world, they're passionate. But then if you look, if you keep expanding your lens all the way to, global impact, you're one person, and you can really get burned out with the kind of the weight of the world. So I liked how you mentioned, like, you have a finite number of causes that are very meaningful for you, and that's how you're choosing to spend your time and your energy at this point, with those two particular causes.
Yeah, I mean, I have this theory: if every person picked one thing they focus on, if everybody got involved in some capacity, just imagine the impact that we would have. And there are many things I care about hunger, I care about childhood issues, I care about health issues, but you sort of can only do so much. So you can either sprinkle your impact, or you can kind of focus in on just a few. And I think as nonprofit professionals, if we don't do community work in some capacity outside of our work hours, it strikes me as a little bit ironic, if not hypocritical. Well, if you care during the hours that you're paid for, like, don't you care in a general sense? Don't you want to be a part of a community, and that makes a difference? So
yeah, absolutely. Those are good points. Thank you. So as I put together these questionnaires for my guests, I do some research on who they are as a professional, sourcing information from LinkedIn. And so a couple of questions here, Olga, are about some of your recent LinkedIn posts. And I work in prospect research at my day job, so there's maybe a little bit of extra detail as I go into these questions. But But one of your recent posts, Olga, was on October 18th, and you posted about reading a book on the topic of habits and the need to have a behavior trigger and a reward. So I would love for you to just talk about what you've learned as you've read that book, and then maybe talk about particularly the habits in your work day, if you could, please.
So I think, it got me thinking, and the book is The Power of Habit, maybe. It's a yellow cover.
Okay.
I'll have to look that up for you. But there are kind of two ways to look at habits. There are organizational habits, the norms that we form as a group of people working together. And then there are individual habits. And kind of the notion that really resonated with me, if you want to, if you want to start a new habit, instead of just sort of organically starting it from scratch, I'm just going to start tomorrow doing this. It's tying it to something else that you already do. So for example, if you already, if you already go for walks, maybe, you tie to that walk, making a phone call to a particular friend or something like that. So it's not just saying, I'm going to call this friend every day. You're tying it to something else that's involved. So I really quite like that notion. It sort of is a little bit gentler because, good intentions a lot of times fail because it's hard to just, remember to do something on top of something every single day. But if you connect it to what you're currently doing, to a current issue, maybe if you're drinking soda, it's saying, well, the triggers, I want something to drink, I want something in my hand, and instead you pour yourself a cup of tea. So it's kind of meeting that same need, and you get that reward of relaxing with your drink. But instead of just wholesale quitting something, starting something, you're connecting the two.
I like that. That's interesting. Right? I hadn't thought about it in that way.
That was very fascinating. So I can give you an example in my own life. When I make my first cup of coffee, I try right around that time to fill up my my water cup, so that I have water on my desk. So.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And then my follow-up question, Olga, is, so you mentioned your kind of morning habit getting into the workday. What do you do if you have any particular habits or routines to return to your life outside of work? Anything come to mind about that?
So I am very much a morning person. So I would say morning exercise, like that's my time to do it. I don't care how much time I have later in the day. I usually really try to stick to that morning workout hour because it just gives you a chance to reset and, just do something for yourself that's very positive, and it's something you feel good about. It's not something that you ever feel like you never regret a workout, right? So I think that's how I tend to start my day. And that's pretty ironclad, I would say.
Oh, great.
Yeah, for me it is. What other habits do I have? I tend to try and transition from kind of that morning exercise, listening to podcasts, etc., to my work day. And I definitely need to, days that I'm not commuting anywhere, or where I'm stationary at my home office, I still need some of those rituals to just sort of be in my work attire and be ready to kind of hit the day. So there's a very kind of specific starting point for me, at least. So I don't know if that addresses that. Other ones are not really so much habits as, like I walk my dog every day because if I don't walk him, he's not going to walk himself. But, it's just, those tend to be, and then not a daily habit, but a very much ingrained in me habit. I always try to consume information. And that's kind of getting a little bit more intellectual. So we talked about physical, but more intellectual. Whether it's podcasts, whether it's audiobooks, I tend to be very audio focused because I can do other things simultaneously.
Sure.
but that started out actually, right around pandemic time, where we had a little bit more leisure time, and you're sort of stationary, and that just takes you outside of your surroundings a little bit.
Right. Yeah, you definitely answered those questions, so thank you. And it made me think. I read an article a while ago about the benefit of getting outside in the morning.
Yes.
The getting the sunshine, maybe trying to clear your head, focus on the day ahead, and to do that first thing. And as you said, that's ironclad for you. Like, just you get out, you get exercising. So that's a great habit. And like you said, I don't maybe do it every day, but it's a nice reminder to, like, before the day gets ahead of you, like, at least carve out 20 minutes or so to do this. So.
Well, it's a no regrets, and a lot of times it just happens on my on my Peloton in my own house, but
Yeah.
But I think it just sort of sets your mind, and you just feel better, right? Like, it just sort of
Absolutely.
gets you a positive start to your day.
Yeah, totally. Well, I would love to pivot here, Olga, and as fellow podcasters, I'm very excited to get your take on this question. So, in addition to your work with LemonSkies, you have an affiliated nonprofit podcast, People of Substance. So, if you could talk with us about what motivated you to launch that, where people can find your conversations. Let's go with those two first, please.
Yeah, so it originated sort of organically, because I would have some wonderful kind of one-on-one conversations with colleagues or friends or peers. And, there are always these nuggets and insights that you just wish you could bottle up and, share with the world. So that was really the impetus for it. And, even ironically, as I'm answering your questions, I enjoy asking questions. I enjoy getting to know people. I find it very interesting. And it's also like, oh, great. I get to hear what you have to say, and I just get to sit back and listen to it. This is fantastic.
Yes.
So it just felt to me like a very natural, like, win-win proposition. Like, I don't want to be constantly talking about me or constantly sharing, like, well, here's all my insights. Eventually you probably will run out of original things to say. Whereas when you're interviewing people, I mean, it's boundless, right? Like, there's just so many interesting journeys, and just breaking through, not just talking about professional things, but just getting to know individuals, what led them to the work they're doing, what are topics they think about. And it's really been a very rewarding experience for me, as I'm sure you gain a lot from interviews with folks you interview. So that's kind of the origin story of it. I post, well, these do get posted on the website, lemon-skies.com. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the most timely, or Facebook, you can follow LemonSkies on Facebook, or follow me on LinkedIn, and that's a good place to get that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I've watched a few of those conversations that you do as the host, and it's really insightful. So thank you. I would love, because we both have these podcasts, I would love for you, Olga, to talk about maybe some of the challenges that come with being a host. Maybe it's finding guests, but also, and you did talk about it just there, like, you love having other people tell you their stories. So just anything about the particulars of being the host of People of Substance, please.
I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I love doing it. I think let me start with the challenge. The biggest challenge is time. The biggest challenge is and I try to be as efficient as I can, but just finding, as you've outlined kindly, there's a lot of things I do. So just carving out that time can be very, very challenging. And it's sort of like you see the interview and you realize there's so much more to it. We did this interview, but this could be a full article, or this could be, you know, a number of other things. And just also knowing, yeah, and I don't have time to do this, so it's gonna have to stand where it is. So accepting that is probably the harder piece of it. But you know, I think that the greatest decision, not to tout my own horn here, the greatest decision I made about people of substance, I deliberately did not say this would be weekly or bi-weekly or with any number of frequency, because I realized that would create pressure that I was not willing to take on. I just didn't want to find myself, well, shoot, I'm going to be away this week, so I need to pre-record something, or you know, just, oh, we have a gap in the schedule. Like, I'm not a broadcasting company. I'm not, you know, I'm not like a revenue-driven podcast. So I just don't want to have to worry about it. So it's just being very flexible. And sometimes there's an episode every week, and sometimes there isn't. And I'm very okay with that.
I could learn a lot from you in that regard.
I never said it was going to be bi-weekly. So it's sort of like, when it comes, it comes. That's a gift.
Yeah. And I like that you said you're not a broadcasting company. You know, it's a balance of your personal commitments, your LemonSkies full-time job, the travel that comes with your full-time job. And so then to find, you know, the right pockets of time to express that interest of having guests on, but not be wedded so much to a schedule. That seems very healthy, and I should try to adopt that better.
You know, I feel like there's so much undue pressure. Like, okay, so if you let's say you like to golf, maybe, like, you seem like you might, just based on where you live. So, you know, if you haven't golfed in a month, does it make you any less of a golfer, right? Like, I just think of like hobbies and interests. It's almost like we put this pressure. Well, if I haven't done it in so long, does it still count? And it's like, well, does it matter? Like, do you have to do it with a certain frequency to make it legitimate? So that's kind of how I try to look at it, just to sleep better at night.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think for me, I try to remind myself that, you know, taking breaks are important, and that no one is screaming for the content if it's not there. Like, it will come out again at some point soon. But yeah, definitely the lesson I'm still trying to learn myself. So as the host of People of Substance, Olga, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the content that you're striving to create and share in these interviews you do, please.
Yeah, so I think it's almost like every person that you meet or you know, there's a set of things you want to talk to them about. And they may be related to the work they're doing, but they may be related to something else that you know about them, or they've shared with you in the past. So I tend to use that as a starting point, especially for those that I know with some degree. It's a little, I find that it's harder to interview people that I've never interacted with in a great degree. So I think just having some of that background tends to be helpful. I tend to ask, like I said, I love asking questions, and I will ask a lot of questions, and I don't shy away from going there. So that definitely helps. And, you know, it's rare that a conversation does not kind of stray away from strict, you know, professional talk. And we don't talk about the dogs, the kids, the travel, you know, the origin stories. So, I mean, just some of the things that come out there, you know, we all have something to share, and, you know, quirky, interesting things that make us unique. So it's kind of breaking through that veneer of like, well, that's your elevator pitch, but let's talk about you. Let's get to know you and what you're interested in. Like what are your hobbies, Tim?
So my hobbies are exercise on a daily basis,
Yep.
except for Sundays. So we have a gym nearby, and so I turned 50 in January of 2025. So my goal is 500 visits to this gym between. I joined the gym last summer of 22, so I'm almost at 300 visits. So it's something I really enjoy, but I tie it to an objective I want to meet. And another hobby, I have 4 kids. My wife and I have 4 kids. And I don't know much about my family's history. I can go back to like my grandparents. And I have names beyond them, but no real stories. So I love journaling about a day or a moment in our family's life. And what I do is I take a photo on my phone and then I download that photo into a Word doc. And I limit myself to 1 page and I write about that moment. The kid by name and how old they are, or how old my wife is at the time, and what we were doing. I give a little bit of narrative, print it off, save it to the cloud, and it's in a binder of family history moments. So those are my 2 that really drive me and kind of fuel my like personal identity as a human, as a father, as a husband, but also kind of feeds my spirit as well. So
I love that. And I feel like 200 visits, like that sounds very achievable. That's what's remaining.
yes, yeah.
And how are you keeping track of them? Like little chicken scratches, or do you have a spreadsheet?
I have both because I love spreadsheets. So I have a calendar in my workspace at my house, and I just check it off every day with the number. Like, it's VASA, VASA is the gym out here in Utah, and the number of the visit on that day. So I'm at 270 today. So aiming to get to 300 by end of December. But then I also keep track on a spreadsheet so I can see it better. Like, what are my best months? What are my worst months? How many times do I go in a row? Again, excluding Sundays. I think my most consecutive days is like 31 in the summer. So
Yeah, I love that.
well, thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
See what we did there?
Yes. Yeah, it's just what you did as your own host. You broke through the professional to get into who is the person, and so great. So thank you.
You're welcome. Now I'm excited for your milestone, so I'll be cheering for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you mentioned walking a dog, and you have kids that are roughly my kids' ages, and exercise. Is travel a hobby for you, your family?
We travel a lot.
Okay.
Well, it's harder with the children's sports and schedules these days, but we try to sneak away when we can. We have a trip next week coming up to New York City, just literally for a couple nights. We're gonna go Spamalot.
Nice.
Yeah, I figured that's as far as we can push it with boys and musical theater. Spamalot is probably the best we can hope for. So we do travel quite a bit, and I would say Europe and South America tends to be kind of the places we try to get to as often as we can.
Awesome.
But we do a lot of. I have too many hobbies. I should probably start cutting back. I try to do kind of art things. I bake quite a bit. I really get into holiday things. So yeah, and, trying to maintain a semblance of a social life. And I'm a football mom, and I'm a swim mom, and a basketball mom. So there's that comes with a lot of driving and a lot of laundry.
Yes. Yes, I know the feeling.
For a hot second. Oh, there you are. You're
There we
moving
are.
again.
Yeah. I can relate to some of those things. Huh. I think that's on my end. I can edit this out.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, my wife decided to switch internet providers recently, so that's why I'm up here in the kitchen, and even that's not helping much with our internet connection. So I apologize.
Okay.
With the last 5-10 minutes, Olga, of our time today, I want to go back to another recent LinkedIn post of yours. You got a lot of feedback on this particular post about building connections among coworkers in the workplace, and especially in this era of hybrid, fully remote, fully office, what are the different environments. If you could talk with us about some of the challenges and the opportunities that you see in forming more collaborative relationships and a sense of fun. You mentioned sparking joy earlier in those working relationships, please.
Yeah, so I think, I think about this a lot, and in facilitating environment that kind of creates that kind of connection, and as a result of connection, collaboration, I don't think it can be left to chance. I think it's a very deliberate effort to create conditions and to send the message that not only is it allowed, but it's encouraged. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what I see as the crux of it. And to your point, it is quite different because, some offices are hybrid, some offices are fully remote, but it's just fundamentally different. Like even when people are in person, a lot of times they're not in the conference room, they're still on the Zoom call.
Yeah.
So it's just really altered. I feel like past few years have really altered our habits. So it's not trying to recreate something, it's trying to adapt and reinvent how we connect with each other. And, that could be as simple as, silly memes or emojis to kind of just lighten the mood. It's just checking in on people virtually.
Yeah.
It's really kind of showing that you care, and taking advantage of in-person opportunities when you have them, to not kind of cross items off the to-do list, but to really dedicate that time to connecting and building conditions that outside of that room will carry you forward. So, it's like if you have an in-office day when everyone gets together, or if you do some sort of retreat, or whatever that looks like for your organization, it's not focusing on how much can we objectively achieve, but it's really to realize there's a different kind of output and different type of productivity, and it sets you for success once you leave that room. But I think the most important piece that I've certainly seen myself, I've certainly heard others talk about, it's kind of the leadership sets that tone, right? So
Yeah.
if leaders model that kind of behavior and encourage that kind of behavior, and make a point of connecting and caring, and just really sort of at the top of the meeting encouraging some small talk and sharing something of themselves, and not sort of trying to maintain that cool, aloof demeanor, but really kind of leaning in a little bit. I think that that starts spreading.
Yeah, I really like that. And thank you for sharing those observations. I feel like, in my experience, like some leaders do that well, and others, it is like, hey, we've got 30 minutes. I've got an agenda. Let's dive in. And that happened in Zoom, in the office full time. So yeah, I think it's just kind of more personality and leadership style. For you, with your clients, do you strive for in person, or is it more like whatever works for the client?
I mean, ultimately, whatever works for the client, it does tend to be remote, because it's just so much faster, right? Like, it's so much easier to just hop on a call for an hour as opposed to spend half an hour, 40 minutes commuting, or travel time. But I definitely feel like regardless of which phone call I'm joining. Like you and I, before we started recording, we spent a few minutes chatting and catching up, right? Like it
Yeah.
just sort of the ice. And I think it doesn't matter if it's my colleagues or if it's my clients or peers. It's kind of showing up as a full human self
Right.
before you get to the business of the business, right? So
Yeah.
I like what you said about how for some leaders, it's sort of like, well, here's a 10-point agenda that we need to achieve in the next 17 minutes. And others are, like, let kind of welcome that interaction. And I think in the environment that we're in, an evolving environment, that soft skills are probably more valuable than ever, because
Yeah.
things that could be sort of skimmed over in-person kind of typical environment in the past, with technology, what it is, you really need to kind of like, yep, I have 17 points that we need to get through, but I'm going to have to be patient and encourage people to chit chat and, kind of connect with each other, because it's important. So it's kind of having that discipline, like even if you're impatient to achieve all the objectives, understanding what are the conditions you need to set in place.
That is so insightful. I really like that. Thank you for sharing that.
You could be seeing that on LinkedIn. I'll tag you.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. That's how we connected, was through LinkedIn, and definitely that the sense I get from your posts, they are professional in nature, but you get to know a little bit about you and finding interests that you have and making it personal. I think that's a fine art on LinkedIn, which is starting to become more of a blend of professional and personal as it is. So I'm just very flattered, Olga, to have you on today. So thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's really been enjoyable and a pleasure. So, and like I said, I'll be cheering for you as you hit that 500 mark. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for our audience, thank you for your support, continued support of the People in Fundraising podcast, now in its third year. You will be able to find Olga's interview on my website, peopleinfundraising.com, and on LinkedIn and YouTube when it goes live in early February of 2024. So again, Olga, thank you. I hope you have a great time in New York City with your family next week, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
thanks for having me.
My pleasure.